Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My grandson vanished at the Nullarbor rest stop. The police won't listen to what I saw. They don't understand the old business. The police in Port Augusta, with their sterile room and their blinking laptop. They think the land is empty. They think it's just dirt and scrub and stars. They don't feel it breathing. My name is Ani May, and my grandson, Cody, is gone. It was on a long drive across the Nullarbor. Just me and him in the old troopy. He was sleeping, his little wooden lizard tucked in his hand. I needed a break, my eyes heavy with the kilometers. I pulled into one of those lonely rest stops, just a concrete bunker with 2 open doorways for toilets, squatting under that huge, star-dusted sky. Cody stirred awake, yawning, slowly blinking his eyes. "Gotta go, Nana," he mumbled, climbing out. I looked at that dark entrance to the men's. No door, just a rectangle of pure black. The air felt thick. "Quick, fella, Cody," I said, my skin prickling. "This country, old business here. Don't be long." He gave me a sleepy nod and scurried into the darkness. I turned to look out at the plain, trying to shake the feeling. This is when you listen, when the land goes quiet. The cicadas stopped chirring. Just like that, the silence was heavier than any noise. Then I felt it, a coldness, a rawness in the pit of my stomach, a feeling my people have known for thousands of years, a feeling that says, something is hunting. I spun around. "Cody." Nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Cody, J-U-K." I screamed into the night. Stillness, the kind of stillness that swallows sound. I ran to the entrance, my old legs screaming in protest, and stared into the black maw of the toilets. "Cody, answer me." I fumbled for my phone, my hand shaking so bad, I almost dropped it. The torch beam cut into the darkness, dancing over graffiti and cracked tiles. There, on the concrete floor, just inside the entrance, was Cody's wooden lizard, snapped clean in 2, but Cody was gone. The sound that came out of me then wasn't a scream. It was a low, guttural moan. The sound of 1,000 puzzle pieces I'd spent a lifetime ignoring suddenly snapping together. The stories my grandfather told by the fire, the ones I dismiss as old fables to keep children from wandering off, they weren't just stories. They were warnings. And in the crushing, unnatural silence of that place, with my grandson's broken toy at my feet, a single, terrifying word surfaced in the depths of memory, a name I hadn't heard spoken in 50 years, the Munganga. The eater. Now, I sit in this cold room with the 2 policemen, Senior Constable Reed and the young one, Davies. They have a liaison officer, Jason, who tries to soften their words. But I see the truth in their eyes. They show me a video on their laptop, a grainy, greenish thing from a security camera. There's my troopy. There I am, a small figure by the car. There's Cody, scurrying into the dark. My breath catches. And then I see it, what I only felt. For seconds after Cody disappears into the darkness, something else enters the frame. From the bottom edge, a patch of moving darkness, a slick, black mass that glides over the ground without moving, like a wave of oil. It doesn't have a shape you could name, just a feeling of solid, hungry shadow. It moves from the edge of the scrub straight into that doorway, flowing inside like water. It went in after him. "Ani, we need to go through it again," Reed says, his voice flat. "For Cody." I felt it. I whisper, my eyes locked on the frozen blur on the screen. The Munganga. It came out of the old country. It glided right in after him. Jason translates. Reed's mouth becomes a thin, tight line. "The Munganga," he says, butchering the word, stripping of its power. "Ani," the tape shows a blur. It could be a dust devil, a trick of the light. We need to know about a person, a vehicle, something real. It's real. My voice cracks. It's older than your lights and your cameras. It took my grandson, and you're sitting here. The young one, Davies, leans forward, his face full of a foolish, earnest pity. Maybe you got scared, honey. Maybe Cody ran out the back and you panicked. We just need to know what really happened. The words hit me like a physical blow. They think I'm a confused old woman. They think my terror is a lie. They're looking at a creature as old as the dream time on their screen. And they call it a blur. I stand up, the chair screeching behind me. My whole body trembles, not with weakness, but with a frantic, screaming urgency they are too blind to see. You're not listening. I scream, pounding my frail fist on the table. It's got him out there. In the dark. You're letting that old evil keep him. They just look at me. They see a hysterical old Aboriginal woman. They let me go after another hour of circular questions. Jason drove me back to my niece's house in Port Augusta. The family was there, a house full of muted grief and silent, understanding looks. They knew. They didn't need the police's permission to believe. My older brother, Joseph, put a hand on my shoulder. His eyes, old and deep like water holes, held the same terrible knowledge. The Munganga, he said, and it wasn't questioned. I just nodded, too exhausted for tears. It's been a long time since one has been spoken of in this country, he murmured. The old songs of that place, they haven't been sung in generations. The land is forgetting the rules. That night, as the family slept a fitful sleep, I sat on the porch and looked south, towards the Nullarbor. I could feel it, a cold thread pulling at my spirit, a connection, a grandmother's bond or a grandson, stretched thin, but not yet broken. And then I heard it, faint, like a dream carried on the wind. Nana, it was Cody's voice, but it was wrong. It was echoey, wet, like it was coming from deep underground. I shot up, my heart in my throat. Cody, I whispered into the night. It's dark, Nana, but I can see the stars from underneath. The voice faded. The connection snapped. I was left standing on the porch, cold sweat on my brow. He wasn't dead. Not yet. The Munganga doesn't kill quickly. It preserves. It takes its prey to its place in the deep earth, and it feeds on the terror, on the spirit, slowly, over a long, long time. The stories say it can keep you aware in the darkness for years. The police won't listen. Their search is already shifting. They're putting out bulletins about a possible custody dispute, suggesting maybe his no-good father snatched him. They're looking for a human monster, because they can't conceive of the other kind. But I am not looking for a monster. I am listening for my grandson. I'm leaving tonight. I've got the troopy packed with water, fuel, and the things my brother Joseph gave me. Red ochre, sacred leaves, the old digging stick that belonged to our grandfather, the tools to sing the old songs, to remind the land of its rules. I am going back to that concrete bunker under the stars. I am going to find the entrance to its burrow. I am going to sing the songs that haven't been sung in 100 years. Songs that tell the Munganga it is not welcome, that it must give back what it has stolen. They think I'm a crazy old woman chasing shadows. But they are wrong. The shadow is chasing my grandson, and I am the only one who knows how to follow it into the dark. Story 2. I went off-trail in Eastern Europe and barely made out alive. Something in the tall grass almost killed me in Romania. Look, I know how this sounds. Another 20-something backpacker with a trust fund and daddy issues, right? Finding myself across 3 continents like some cliche from a Gap Year brochure. But hear me out. I'm Andrew. And yeah, I was trying to find myself, as corny as that sounds. Klamath born and raised, bro. Those mountains taught me everything about reading terrain, surviving in the backcountry, and respecting the wilderness. By the time I turned 25, I'd already knocked out some serious treks. We're talking the Andes in Peru, where the altitude will drop you if you're not careful. The Cameron Highlands in Malaysia during the monsoon season. 3 weeks solo in the Yukon Territory, where the grizzlies outnumber the people about 50-1. Hell, I even did a walkabout in the Australian outback with nothing but a water filter and some emergency rations. The point is, I wasn't some tourist with brand new gear and zero experience. I knew my stuff, could set up camp in a wideout, navigate by stars, identify edible plants, the whole deal. But the steppes of Eastern Europe? That was the only place I've ever been legitimately afraid I was going to die. Not hypothermia, not dehydration, not getting lost. Something else entirely. Something that made me understand why some places have warnings that go way deeper than stay on marked trails. This was about 10 years ago, when I was still stupid enough to think experience trumped local knowledge every single time. I was working my way across Eastern Europe, planning to hit all the major trail systems from the Carpathians down through the Balkans. Had this whole route mapped out on my GPS watch. Hostels booked, the works. Not exactly the most popular trekking route, but that's what appealed to me. Lesser known trails, you know? None of that overcrowded Alps bullshit, where you're basically walking in a conga line of German tourists. I'd done my research. Knew the area could be tricky navigation-wise since there aren't many landmarks, but I had good topo maps and solid GPS backup. The weather looked stable. I was carrying a week's worth of food, plenty of water purification tablets, standard cold weather gear. Even though it was late spring, the locals weren't exactly enthusiastic about my plans. This old guy at the outdoor supply shop kept shaking his head when I showed him my route. Stay on trails, stay near roads, he kept saying in broken English. Not go through tall grass alone. I figured it was a usual rural paranoia about outsiders. Maybe some old Soviet-era superstitions about wandering around in restricted zones. Plus, my Romanian was garbage and his English wasn't much better. So I figured we were just having a communication breakdown. Should have listened. The border crossing from Moldova into Romania was more of a hassle than I'd expected. There's no real infrastructure for foot traffic at most of these crossings. They're designed for cars and trucks, not some American with a backpack trying to walk between countries. The Moldovan guards barely glanced at my passport, but the Romanian side was different. The officer looked maybe 25, probably bored out of his mind working this remote crossing. He flipped through my passport, asked me a bunch of questions in broken English about where I was going, how long I planned to stay, and whether I had accommodations booked. When I explained I was planning a hike overland down through the Balkans, his expression changed. He called over an older guard, and they had a rapid conversation in Romanian that I couldn't follow. Finally, the older guy looked at me and said, "You have guide?" "No guide. I'm experienced. I have maps, GPS." More Romanian between them. Then the younger officer held out his hand. In that universal gesture, that means one thing. I slipped him a 20-euro note, and suddenly my paperwork was in order. But as I was shouldering my pack to leave, the older guard grabbed my arm. His English was better than I'd expected. "You stay on marked trails only. Keep near farms. If you find tall grass, stay out. It is dangerous." Oddly mirroring the warning from the supply shop owner. I thanked him and assured him I'd be careful. But I could see in his eyes he didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. He was right. I should have asked him what kind of danger. Should have pressed for details instead of just nodding and walking away like I knew better. Instead, I crossed into Romania thinking I'd just gotten a standard tourist warning about wolves or wild boar, maybe some concern about unexploded ordnance from old conflicts. I had no idea they were trying to save my life. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. Made good time. Terrain was manageable, weather held up. The hostels were warm and friendly. But I was burning through more miles than expected on established trails, and my GPS was showing this game trail that would cut about 15 miles off my route to the next resupply point. 15 miles is huge when you're carrying a full pack. Game trails are usually pretty reliable. Animals know the easiest paths better than any human trail designer, so I went off trail. The game trail was solid at first, well-worn, maybe 2 feet wide, cutting straight through this endless sea of tall grass and scrubland. The steps out here weren't like anything I'd seen before. Not prairie grass like in the Midwest or the scrubland I was used to from California. The stuff grew in thick, irregular clumps, some patches knee-high, others reaching almost to my chest, dense enough that you couldn't see more than maybe 20 yards in any direction. My topo maps showed this whole area as intermittent farmland and low-lying scrub. But on the ground, it was just grass, endless and tall, swallowing the horizon. It felt like the map was a lie, and I'd wandered into some nature preserve or government land. Maybe a large industrial farm had gone fallow for years. What it felt like most was that I'd walked into a part of the country that wasn't supposed to be there, or walked back in time. The landscape was almost primordial. I'd been following the trail for about an hour when things started feeling off. Hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. You know how in the mountains, you can feel weather changes in your bones before the barometer drops? This was similar, but different somehow, like the landscape itself was subtly off-kilter. The wind patterns weren't making sense. I'd feel a breeze from the east, then a few steps later it would shift completely, coming from the south, then die altogether. But the grass wasn't moving with it consistently. Some patches would sway normally, others would stay perfectly still, even when I could feel the wind on my face. I stopped, did a full 360-degree scan like I'd been trained. Listened hard. The usual step sounds were there. Insects, some distant bird calls, that constant whisper of grass moving against itself. Nothing obviously threatening, but my gut was telling me something different. That's when I heard the thunder of hooves. A whole group of wild boar came crashing through grass, maybe 30 yards to my left, running flat out like something was chasing them. Must have been 8 or 10 of them, including a massive sow that had to weigh 300 pounds easy. They were moving perpendicular to my trail, and didn't even seem to notice me. My heart rate spiked for a second. Wild boar are no joke if they decide you're a threat, but they were clearly running from something, not at me, probably spooked by my scent and bolting for safer territory. I laughed at myself, took a drink of water, and kept walking. But that feeling of being watched never went away. And now I was starting to notice other things. Patches of grass that seemed to move independently, flowing in patterns that didn't match the wind. Always just at the edge of my peripheral vision. Always stopping the moment I turned to look directly. Something was tracking me through the grass. Something that knew how to stay hidden. I had maybe 2 seconds between seeing the grass part and the thing hitting me. It came from directly ahead, staying so low to ground that I barely caught the movement. Just this ripple in the grass, like a boulder rolling downhill. Except boulders don't move that fast, and they sure as hell don't have teeth. I did what I thought would work with aggressive wildlife. Threw my pack hard to the left, hoping to distract it, and dove right into the thickest patch of grass I could see. It was a gamble, but I figured anything was better than just standing there. The thing didn't even glance at my pack. I hit the ground and immediately tried to roll, get my feet back under me, but something clamped down on my left leg just above the ankle, like a steel trap covered in sandpaper. The pressure was incredible, like it was going to snap my tibia in half. Then it started dragging me. I'm telling you, I've been in situations before. Rock slides, flash floods, and even had a mountain lion stalk me for half a day in the Sierras. But getting dragged backwards through tall grass by something you can't even see clearly, that's a whole different kind of terror. My hands clawed at everything. Grass roots, rocks, anything to slow down the drag. The thing was hauling me like I weighed nothing, maybe 30 or 40 yards through this maze of vegetation. I could hear my jacket tearing, felt the ground scraping against my back and shoulders. My hiking pants were getting shredded against whatever was holding me. I tried to twist around to see what had me, maybe get a good kick in with my free leg. But every time I lifted my head, all I could make out was this shape that seemed to shift and blur, like it was made of the same grass and earth it was moving through. Then suddenly it let go. I scrambled backwards on my hands and ass, putting distance between me and whatever was out there, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My leg was on fire where it had grabbed me, but everything still moved, which meant nothing was broken. The grass around me was completely still. No movement, no sound except my own ragged breathing. But I knew it was still there, watching me. I sat there in the grass for maybe 30 seconds, trying to get my breathing under control, when I noticed something was wrong with my leg. The bite marks were deeper than I thought, for puncture wounds, 2 on each side of my calf, like it had grabbed me with oversized fangs. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how the skin around the wounds was already starting to change color. At first, I thought it was just blood pooling under the skin, normal bruising from the pressure. But bruises don't spread that fast, and they sure as hell don't turn that shade of greenish black. The discoloration was creeping outward from each puncture, maybe a ½ inch in diameter already, and I could feel this weird tingling sensation moving up toward my knee. Venom. The thing had injected me with something. I've been bitten by rattlesnakes before, an occupational hazard when you spend enough time in the California backcountry. I know what venom feels like as it starts working through your system. This was different, though. Rattlesnake venom burns. This felt cold, like ice water spreading through my veins. My hands were shaking as I rolled up my pant leg to get a better look. The puncture wounds weren't bleeding much, but the skin around them was starting to swell. When I pressed on the discolored area, I couldn't feel my finger. The numbness was spreading faster than the discoloration. I had to move. Now, whatever this thing had pumped into me, I couldn't let it reach my core circulation. If it got in my heart or lungs before I found help, I was done. I pulled my belt off, wrapped it around my thigh as tight as I could stand, and buckled it. The pressure was immediate and brutal, but it would slow the venom spread, maybe by me a few hours. My pack was still sitting where I'd thrown it, about 20 yards away. I could see the thing hadn't touched it, which meant it was either gone or waiting to see what I'd do next. I couldn't worry about that now. I needed my first aid kit, my GPS, and whatever water I had left. The nearest help was less than a few hours' hike, if I pushed hard. I just had to make it that far before my leg rotted off. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop relying on both legs. The hiking pole became a crutch, taking most of my weight, while I dragged my left leg behind me. Every step sent jolts of pain up through my hip, but the alternative was worse. The weird thing was how quiet everything had gotten. No more rustling in the grass, no sense of being stalked. At first, I thought that was good news. Maybe the thing had given up, moved on to easier prey. Then I realized what was actually happening. It didn't need to hunt me anymore. The venom would do the work for it. All the thing had to do was follow at a distance and wait for the poison to drop me. Then it could feed at its leisure. The thought made me push harder, even though my leg was starting to look like something out of a medical textbook. The swelling had gotten so bad that I'd had to cut my pant leg open with my utility knife. The discoloration had spread past my knee, creeping up my thigh in these twisted, vein-like patterns that looked awful. I was following what looked like an animal trail, hoping it would lead to higher ground where I could get my bearings. When the grass opened up into the shallow depression, maybe 15 feet across, carved into the earth like a giant's footprint. That's when I saw them. Eggs. Dozens of them. Clustered in the center of the depression like some kind of reptilian nursery. Each one was about the size of a football, with shells so thin they were almost transparent. I could see things moving inside, dark shapes that shifted and pulsed with their own rhythm. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the movement. It was the color changes. The things inside the eggs were cycling through different hues, brown, green, gray, like they were practicing camouflage before they even hatched. I'd stumbled into a breeding ground. The adult that had bitten me wasn't protecting territory. It was protecting its young. And if there were eggs that developed, there were probably other adults nearby. Maybe a whole family of these things, waiting in the grass around the nest. I backed away from the depression as quietly as I could, trying not to disturb anything, trying not to think about how many more of them might be out there. My leg felt like it was on fire now, the numbness replaced by this deep, throbbing ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. I had to get out of here. I had to get away from this nest and away from this entire area, however far these things claimed as their hunting ground. I needed to be beyond it before the venom finished whatever it was doing to me. I gripped my hiking pole tighter and started moving again, twice as fast as before, even though every step felt like my leg might snap in half. An hour later, I forced myself to stop. My body was shutting down whether I liked it or not. I found a patch of slightly higher ground where I could see maybe 50 yards in each direction and collapsed against my pack. The GPS said I still had 5 miles to the nearest buildings marked on the map. A farm, probably maybe a small village. 5 miles normally wouldn't even register as a real hike, but with my leg the way it was, it might as well have been 100. I made myself eat half a protein bar and drink some water. Even though my stomach was cramping up, dehydration would kill me faster than the venom if I weren't careful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, following basic wilderness survival protocols while something actively tried to digest me from the inside out. This wasn't the first time I'd been in serious trouble in the backcountry. I got bit by a diamondback in Joshua Tree about 6 years ago. Had to hike 4 miles back to the trailhead with my legs swollen up like a balloon. Spent 3 days in the hospital, but I made it out. There was that time in Colorado when I got my foot wedged under a boulder during a river crossing. Took me 2 hours to work myself free, and by then, hypothermia was setting in from the snowmelt. I was shaking so hard I could barely grip my gear, but I got myself to shelter and rode it out. The point is, I've been hurt before. I've been scared before. I knew how to push through when everything in your body is telling you to quit. But this was different. Those other times, I knew what I was dealing with. Snakebite, hypothermia, dehydration. There are protocols for that stuff. Treatment options. This thing that had been me, I had no idea what its venom was designed to do, how fast it worked, what the end game looked like. I caught myself starting to roll up my pant leg to check the wound and stopped. I didn't want to know. Whatever was happening down there, looking at it wasn't going to help anything. All it would do was freak me out more, maybe make me panic when I needed to stay focused. 5 miles. That was the only number that mattered now. I shouldered my pack, adjusted my grip on the hiking pole, and started moving again, one step at a time, like always, just like every other mountain I'd ever climbed. Every trail I'd ever finished. The difference was, this time, the mountain was trying to kill me from the inside. I was maybe 2 miles close to the farm when I saw it again. This time, I had the advantage. I was coming up a slight rise, using my hiking pole to pull myself along, when something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the grass looked odd about 30 yards ahead, or maybe my subconscious picked up on movement that didn't match the wind patterns. Whatever it was, I dropped low and stayed perfectly still. At first, I couldn't make out anything unusual, just more of the same endless grass, swaying in the afternoon breeze. Then the breeze stopped and one patch kept moving. The thing was massive, easily 12 feet long, maybe more, with the bulk of a saltwater crocodile, but completely different in every other way. Instead of 4 legs, it had 6, 3 on each side, spaced evenly along its body like some kind of prehistoric centipede. But the weirdest part was watching its skin change. I'd seen chameleons do their color-shifting thing before, but this was on a completely different level. The creature's hide rippled and flowed through different patterns, brown earth tones, green grass colors, even the dappled shadows where sunlight filtered through the vegetation. It wasn't just changing color, it was changing texture too, mimicking the look of dried grass stalks and broken earth so perfectly that even knowing exactly where it was, I kept losing track of its outline. The head was pure nightmare fuel, flat and wide, kind of like a cobra, but proportioned for something 10 times bigger. When it turned slightly, I could see these yellow eyes scanning the area with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't some dumb predator operating on instinct. This thing was thinking. 6 legs. I'd been hiking and camping for over a decade, studied wildlife biology in college, and spent time with rangers and naturalists all over the world. Nothing I'd ever heard of had 6 legs and looked like that. This was something completely unknown, something that had been hiding out here for who knows how long. I had to get a picture. Nobody would believe this without proof. And if I didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence of what killed me. Moving as slowly as possible, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. No service like I expected, but the camera still worked. I lined up the shot, zoomed in as much as I could, and held my breath. The shutter click seemed to echo across the entire step. The creature's head snapped toward me instantly, those yellow eyes locking onto my position with terrifying precision. I pressed myself into the grass, trying to become part of the landscape, but I could hear it moving now, not the heavy thrashing I'd expected, but the smooth, almost silent gliding sound as it flowed through the vegetation toward me. I closed my eyes and tried to stop breathing. My leg was throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I was sure the thing could smell the infection, the venom, whatever chemical markers I was throwing off as its poison did its work. The sound stopped maybe 10 yards away. I could feel it there, waiting, testing the air. Seconds crawled by like hours. Then finally, the gliding sound moved away, heading off toward the east. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared to lift my head. It was gone, but I knew it might circle back. These things were smart, patient. I had to move fast. I checked the photo on my phone. Blurry, but you could make out the basic shape, the weird proportions, the 6 legs. If I made it to that farm, this would change everything. Cryptozoologists would lose their minds. But first, I had to survive the next 2 miles of a leg that felt like it was dissolving from the inside out. The last half mile was pure hell. My vision kept swimming in and out of focus, and I was leaning so heavily on the hiking pole that my shoulder felt like it was going to dislocate. Every step sent waves of nausea through my system, but I could see buildings ahead, long, industrial structures that had to be some kind of agricultural operation. I stumbled through a gap in a wire fence and onto a dirt road. My legs gave out about 50 yards from the nearest building, and I hit the ground hard, my hiking pole clattering away across the gravel. Voices started shouting in Romanian, footsteps running toward me. I tried to sit up, tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out as gibberish. Through the haze, I could make out the word Agro-Industrial painted across one of the buildings, but the rest of the company name kept shifting and blurring like it was underwater. Strong hands lifted me, and I heard someone curse when they saw my leg. One of the workers, a middle-aged guy in coveralls, was pointing at the wound and shouting, "Ambulanta, ambulanta," to someone with a radio. Another voice, older, gravelly, said something that included Belor Iarba. The word sent a chill through the other workers. They all started talking at once, their voices tight with what sounded like genuine fear. Grass dragon. Even through the venom haze, I understood that much. They knew about these things. They had a name for them. My breathing was getting more labored, each inhale feeling like I was trying to suck air through wet concrete. The world was tilting sideways, and I couldn't tell if I was lying down or standing up anymore. I rolled over, and my mind felt like it short-circuited. The steps I had walked through were gone, just vanished. Where before there was an endless sea of grass, now it was what looked like miles of farmland. Surely this must have been just an effect of the venom. I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember clearly was the interior of an ambulance, the rhythmic bump of tires on asphalt, and a paramedic working over my leg while speaking rapid-fire Romanian into a radio. The siren seemed to be coming from very far away, like I was underwater. Then everything went black. I'm sitting in my study right now, looking at a printout of that photo, 10 years later, and it's still the only proof I have that any of this really happened. The image quality is terrible. You can barely make out the creature's outline through grass, and the 6 legs just look like shadows and vegetation to most people. I've shown it to cryptozoologists, wildlife biologists, and even posted on forums dedicated to unknown species. The response is always the same, obviously photoshopped, or camera artifact, or my personal favorite, "Nice try, but we can spot a fake from a mile away." I don't blame them. If someone had shown me this picture before my trip to Romania, I would have said the same thing. I roll up my pant leg and look at the scars. For puncture marks, 2 on each side of my calf, exactly where I remember them. The skin around them is still slightly discolored, like old bruising that never quite faded. Sometimes when the weather changes, the whole area aches with a deep, bone-level pain that reminds me exactly how close I came in never making a home. The hospital records from Redacted are pretty sparse. I was there for 6 days, apparently, though I only remember fragments. For drips, doctors speaking in rapid Romanian, Someone asking me questions in broken English about what had bitten me. When I tried to explain about the creature, about the camouflage and the 6 legs, they just nodded politely and wrote something down that probably translated to patient is delusional from venom exposure. The flight back to the States is mostly a blur. 2. I was still pretty messed up, running on whatever cocktail of antibiotics and antivenoms they'd pumped into me. But I made it home, and after a few months of physical therapy, I was almost back to normal. Almost. I still hike, still travel. But I'm different now in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't been where I've been. When locals tell me not to go somewhere, I listen. When my gut says something feels off about a trail or a campsite, I trust it. And when I'm in a remote country, I pay attention to sound that don't belong and movements that feel off or don't match the wind. Because I learned something out there that no amount of wilderness experience had taught me before. The world is bigger and stranger than any of us wants to admit. There are things out there, creatures, that evolution forgot to tell us about, ecosystems that operate by rules we haven't figured out yet. And sometimes, no matter how prepared you think you are, hubris can be just as deadly as anything with teeth and venom. Story 3. My mom is being framed for witchcraft. It's just me and my mom. My dad knocked her up when she was 16 and then got arrested for statutory rape. My mom had me and moved us far away. Unfortunately, she hadn't done her research, and we ended up in an extremely conservative town. No one's been that fond of us since we got here. Even though we're Christian like them, they side-eye us, especially my mom. She hasn't told anyone the circumstances of how she ended up as a young, single mother. But even if she did, they would still blame her. After all, they blamed the last teenager who got knocked up by a youth pastor. He still works at the church, blessed with the town's forgiveness, while the girl left town as soon as she became of age, cast out by her own family. To this day, my mom refuses to let him anywhere near me. Yesterday should have been just a normal Sunday. Most of the town attended the morning service, which went as it usually did. It wasn't until we exited the church that a little girl named Veronica Eldridge screamed and collapsed to the ground, limbs flailing. At first, everyone thought she was having a seizure, but to our horror, her leg lifted and dragged her upwards as if a rope was pulling her up. But there was no rope, just a little girl floating in midair and screaming. It shouldn't have been possible, but we were all seeing it. But that wasn't the biggest shock. Veronica managed to steady her arm and pointed at someone. Please stop. Please. Everyone turned to look at the person she was accusing. I did too, but I didn't have to look far. My mom turned pale as she realized what was happening. Veronica was still screaming, but my mom tried to shout that it wasn't her. I knew it couldn't be her, but I also knew that no one would believe her. She grabbed my arm and tried to get us to leave, but several of the men surrounded us and wrenched us away from each other. Now 3 of us were screaming because I was begging them to let my mom go and that she was innocent. They wouldn't listen as they dragged my mom away from the church entrance. Someone must have called 911 because the sound of sirens were approaching. A police car and an ambulance pulled up in front of the church. The responders exited their vehicles and were momentarily shocked by the scene they were witnessing. The cops were brought back to reality when the men restraining my mom dragged her to the police car, yelling that she was a witch and possessing Veronica. One of them, a woman, seemed a little skeptical, but the male cops seemed to have no qualms about arresting my mom. I ran over them, begging them not to take her away, ignoring the paramedics who rushed past me to see if they could do anything to help Veronica. The woman looked hesitantly at her partner, who shrugged. An arrest had to be made. He sat my mom in the back seat. Both cops got in the car. Then they drove off while I stood there, watching helplessly. Behind me, I could hear Veronica's scream subsiding and turned to see that she was slowly descending to the ground. As soon as she was lying down on the ground, again, the paramedics moved in and transferred her to a stretcher. From what I could hear, it sounded like they were going to take her to the hospital to ensure she was okay. I know I'm not okay. As of now, I'm in the courthouse waiting for my foster placement hearing. They tried to contact my biological father, but I informed them of the active restraining order. With no other known relatives in contact, they had no choice but to declare me a ward of the state, while my mom waited for due process. I don't know what's going to happen, nor do I understand what's going on. History claims that the Salem witch trials from over 300 years ago were just girls making up stories, likely under their father's influence. This wasn't a made-up story, though. You can pretend to see stuff and feel pain all you want, but no one can fake being pulled up into the air by nothing. If there's a witch in this town, then maybe we're all in danger. But it's not my mom. It can't be my mom. Whoever is the real witch is framing her. Story 4. I took a wrong turn in the woods and ended up at a motel that doesn't exist on any map. I don't know where I am. I don't know when I am. All I know is the last place I remember being was Highway 74, somewhere deep in the Appalachians, trying to beat the storm. The rain came down so fast it was like driving through a car wash. My GPS froze right after I took the exit for gas. Not that it mattered. There was no station, no buildings, no signs. Just forest. Thick trees swallowed both sides of the road. My headlights barely made a dent in the dark. Then the road got narrow. Gravel turned to mud. My cell had no service, just a mocking searching. In the corner of the screen, I should have turned back, but I couldn't. There was nowhere to turn. I drove what felt like hours before the trees opened up, and I saw it. A crooked sign with one flickering bulb and peeling white letters. Pine Bend Motel Vacancy. It looked abandoned. A one-story strip of maybe 8 rooms, paint blistered, roof sagging. The whole place leaned, like it was too tired to stand, but the lights were on in the office. Barely. And at that point, anything was better than sleeping in the car. I killed the engine and stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the air was wrong. Too still. Too quiet. No wind. No bugs. No sound. Like the forest was holding its breath. Inside the office was even worse. The walls were yellow with age and smoke. The counter warped from water damage. It smelled like mildew and something metallic. A bell sat on the desk, dusty and untouched. I rang it. A moment passed. Then another. I was about to leave when I heard a slow shuffle from the back room, like something dragging its feet. And then she appeared. An old woman, or something wearing the shape of one. Her skin was gray, almost translucent. Her hair hung in damp, clotted strands. Her eyes were clouded, but locked straight on me like she could see through me. "You made good time," she said. Her voice was wet, like something gurgling up from a drain. I didn't know what to say. "You'll be in room 3, she continued, sliding a key across the desk with fingers that were far too long. "Don't open the curtains." That's all she said. No ID, no payment. Just turned and walked into the dark. Room 3 was cold. No matter how long I was in there. I couldn't warm up. The heater rattled, but nothing came out. The walls were thin. Thin enough that I could hear the man in room 4, sobbing quietly for hours. At least, I thought it was a man. I closed the bathroom door, without turning on the light. The mirror was warped like water-stained glass, and my reflection lagged a half-second behind. I sat on the bed. That's when I noticed the window. The curtains were closed, but they moved. Barely. Like someone on the other side was breathing against them. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared, and they kept swaying softly like lungs inhaling, exhaling. I told myself it was the wind, even though there was no wind. Around 3 a.m., the phone rang, that old rotary phone on the wall, dusty, dead-looking. Let out a single shrill ring that nearly made me piss myself. I answered it, heart pounding, static, then a voice. "Don't let them know you're awake." Click. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I sat in the dark, holding my breath, listening to whatever was moving around just outside the door. Scraping, shuffling, breathing. I thought about leaving. I really did. But when I looked outside, there were no cars, no road, no forest, just a long row of identical motel rooms stretching into the dark. Room 4, Room 5, Room 6, Room 7. Then again, Room 4, Room 5. They were looping. I opened the door to my room. The hallway was there now, not the parking lot. A hallway that should have been outside, and it was longer than it could possibly be. Doors lined both sides, some open, some cracked, some covered in something thick and dark. I started walking. I don't know why. Maybe because staying still felt worse. The doors were numbered wrong. Room 9, then room 3 again, then a door marked in tally marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scratched into the wood. One of the doors wasn't a door at all. Just black, like a hole torn into the wall. From one of the rooms, I heard scratching, not on the floor, but the ceiling, above me, and a voice, childlike, "Help me, he's in the walls." I ran. I don't know how long I ran. At some point, I ended up back in my room. The real one, or a copy of it. The bed was made. The light was off. The curtains weren't moving anymore. I thought maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I was just exhausted. But then I saw it. On the mirror. A handprint from the inside of the glass. And underneath it, written backwards in streaky red letters, "You never checked out. That was last night. Or 100 nights ago. I don't know anymore. There are no clocks. No phones. Just a ringing. Sometimes I hear new guests arriving. I try to warn them. I pound on the walls. I scream through the vents. I see their shadows through curtains. But they never hear me. They always stay the night. And now, so do I. Story 5. I tried to translate the Voynich manuscript. I shouldn't have taken the job. I tell myself that a lot these days. Not out loud, not in a mirror. I don't have a nerve for that anymore. But the thought rings in my head like a bad radio frequency every time I close my eyes. You shouldn't have taken the job. I was a grad student with specialty no one cared about. Medieval codices, obscure languages, half-forgotten scribes who live and die by candlelight. My professors used to say my thesis was the kind of thing people skim over in footnotes and forget. And then I got the email. A private collector in New England, anonymous, said he had something rare. Said my name had been recommended. Offered me 6 months of work. Quiet, paid in cash. I didn't need to ask what it was. I already knew. Everyone in my field knows. The Voynich manuscript. I expected to find disappointment. Some high-grade facsimile. Another imitation meant to keep the myth alive. What I found instead was the real thing. Not behind glass, not in some climate control vault, but laid bare in a cedar trunk, wrapped in linen that smelled of smoke. I remember my fingers trembling as I unwrapped it. The calfskin stiff but alive with the grease of centuries. The ink sharp, darker than it had any right to be after 500 years. And the drawings. Always the drawings. Naked women waist-deep in impossible pools. Plants that never grew on this earth. Constellations that refused to map to any sky. The words dancing between them in script that shouldn't exist. Like someone had taken Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and crushed them together until the meaning bled out. I told myself I wouldn't get lost in it. That I'd do the work. Catalog what I could, and collect my money. That was 3 months ago. Now the script is burned into my eyelids. I see it in coffee stains and raindrops in the cracks on my ceiling. The letters rearrange themselves every time I look away. My notebooks are a graveyard of half-translations, none of which agree with each other. But sometimes I know I'm close. There are pages that don't sit right. One in particular, a fold-out map covered in loops and funnels that look less like geography and more like plumbing. Tubes feeding into chambers, chambers feeding into pits, everything flowing downward like water down a drain. The women in those drawings aren't bathing. They're sinking. I tried tracing the map once. I set my pen to the top left corner and followed it down. By the time I reached the center, my wrist was bleeding. Not a scratch, not a cut, just blood, as if the act of following the path had pulled it out of me. I burned that page. I shouldn't have. But the thing about burning is that the image never really dies. It just changes color. Now, every time I close my eyes, I see the map glowing red in the dark. And the worst part? I think I understand pieces now. Just words, fragments, the vessel, the root, the marrow, the keeper, the drawings of the women. They're not random. They're not even women. Not really. They're diagrams. Anatomical. Not human anatomy. Something older. Something stretched across centuries and skinned alive in ink. 2 nights ago, I woke to find a manuscript open on my desk. I hadn't left it that way. A single word had been written in the margin in fresh ink, still wet when I touched it. My name. I don't remember screaming. I only remember the taste of blood in my mouth and the sense that someone had been sitting at my desk, quill in hand, waiting for me to notice. Since then, I can't shake the feeling that the manuscript isn't describing something. It's inviting me to it. I started dreaming in its alphabet, not reading, speaking. The words roll off my tongue like I've known them longer than English, longer than breathing. I wake up gasping, the taste of copper in my mouth, like the sounds themselves are cutting me from the inside. The diagrams don't stay still anymore. I'll look at them, and the ink shifts like tidewater. Roots stretch, pools deepen, figures lower themselves further into the funnels, arms outstretched towards something beneath the parchment, something that was always there, waiting for the right set of eyes. 2 nights ago, my neighbor pounded on the wall at 3 a.m., swearing at me for chanting. I wasn't chanting. I was asleep, but when I checked my voice recorder the next morning, I heard myself, a rasping whisper, repeating the same string of words over and over in that impossible script. Marrow, keeper, vessel, open. When I listened again, slower, I swear I heard a second voice joining mine. Last night was worse. The manuscript was on the floor, wide open, though I'd locked away in the trunk. The new page was still there, the faceless figure hunched over the book. But now, beneath it, the letters had shifted again. I translated what I could. It wasn't much, just a phrase. You are already written. I slammed the manuscript shut, threw it into the trunk, buried the trunk in the basement, under concrete bags until my arms gave out. I thought if I could cover in enough weight, I could bury whatever was trying to pull out of me. But tonight, when I came back upstairs, my desk lamp was already on. A single page was waiting there. Not parchment, printer paper. My printer had spat it out, humming happily like it had done nothing wrong. The same faceless figure stared back at me, the script wrapped around it like a halo. But this time, the letters had become clear. It wasn't a manuscript anymore. It was my handwriting. And the phrase was no translation, no puzzle, just English. Read aloud. I didn't. I couldn't. My lips trembled around the shape of the first word, and my chest seized like something inside me was clawing for escape. I crumpled the page and burned it in the sink, but the smoke curled upward in the shape of letters, perfect letters, before dissolving into the ceiling. And as the ash flaked into the drain, I realized I knew the words anyway. Every syllable, every break. I didn't need the page anymore. I can hear the manuscript whispering from under the concrete. Not words this time. Breathing. Waiting. And I think I finally understand what all of this has been building toward. The Voynich manuscript isn't a book. It's a mirror. A trap. A lineage. Someone had to keep it alive. Someone had to carry the next verse. Now it's me. I know how this sounds. I know what kind of people come here. And I know how this will read. Another half-mad rant from someone who dug too deep into a thing best left alone. But this isn't a ghost story or a campfire tale. I'm writing this here because I can't trust anyone else with it. And because if you start seeing the symbols too, in your dreams and your coffee stains and the cracks in your ceiling, maybe you'll recognize them before it's too late. I don't care if you believe me. I only care that when the manuscript finds you, you'll remember I tried to warn you. Because once the words learn your mouth, you do not own them. They carve themselves into the marrow until you are less flesh than inscription. And when the last breath leaves you, the book does not close. It simply turns a page. Story 6. My neighbor's dog is named Satan. There's something wrong about him. Hey, don't let Satan out, she yelled as I opened my apartment door, arms full of groceries. That's when I saw him there, in the hallway. A skinny mutt with that sad, sheltered dog look in his eyes. He walked slowly, curious. Then the neighbor, this woman in her 70s who walked a limp, came rushing over and gently scolded him for sneaking out. Your dog's name is Satan? I asked, without even thinking if it sounded rude. She laughed and said yeah. Said she knew it made people raise their eyebrows, but that was the name on his tag. The building superintendent had found him about a week earlier, wandering around the street. He tried to track down the original owner since there was a collar, but no luck. So he asked if she wanted to take him in. After telling me the whole story, she tugged his leash and let him back inside. But the dog kept looking at me, wouldn't stop staring. Over the next few days, I saw Satan here and there. When she walked him, or when she accidentally left her door open and he wandered the hallway again. Every time I ran into him, he came right up to me like he wanted something. His eyes were wide and sad, too sad. Something about them felt off. One morning, I left early for the gym before work. As I stepped out of my apartment, I heard a sound, like a scream, but weird. It was low and drawn out, like someone running out of breath. It was coming from the neighbor's place. I knocked on her door and asked if everything was okay. No answer. The sound kept going. I tried the handle and it burned my hand. That's when I saw smoke coming from the cracks. The noise woke up the rest of the floor, and a few of us busted the door open. We found her in the living room, sitting in her chair, on fire, but not like a house fire. The flames weren't spreading. They were only on her, burning her skin away while she just sat there, silent now. The smell hit me hard. I still gag when I think about it. Satan wasn't anywhere in the apartment. No one could explain how the fire started. The cops said something about her phone and the chair being super flammable, but no one really bought it. I kept wondering where the dog had gone, even though I figured that was the end of it. But 2 days later, coming home from work, I heard the sound of paws heading my way. I turned around and there was Satan, standing right next to me with the same eyes as before. Right behind him, holding his leash, was this middle-aged accountant I kind of knew by sight. He lived alone on the second floor and was a short guy who was always squinting like his glasses weren't doing their job. Bit of an oddball. I asked how he found the dog, and he said the super had found him a couple days ago, curled up by a thrash can outside, scared and starving. And do you still call him Satan? I asked, eyeing the tag still hanging from his collar. Of course. That's his name, he said with a shrug. That bugged me. Not gonna lie. Just change the damn name. I didn't dwell on it too much and got on with my life. Until a few days later, at lunch, some co-workers started talking about a horrible accident that happened the day before. Some guy's car exploded the moment he turned the keys on. Fire engulfed the whole thing for nearly half an hour, even with firefighters on the scene. One of them showed me a video someone had taken on their phone while walking past it, and you can't imagine the shock I felt when I realized it was the accountant in that car. Flames wrapped the car completely, and inside the man let out a low, endless scream, just like a neighbor. I spent the whole day trying to make sense of what happened and what the dog had to do with it, but nothing fit. That night, when I went down to take out the trash, I was stunned to see a teenage girl holding Satan on a leash with her father behind her. We named him Duke. The super gave him to us today, said the owner abandoned him. The father explained. It's always been her dream to have a dog. She looked so happy, and at least they changed the name. But after what I'd seen, I couldn't leave that dog in their hands. I pretended to be his real owner, said I demanded they give it to me, and even threatened to call the cops. The girl started crying, and I hated doing it, but it was for her own good. I left with the dog and brought him into my apartment. I'll be honest, I was scared as hell I'd end up like the others. But the second he walked in, he just sat in the corner, staring at me with those same sad eyes. At first I was afraid, then I started feeling sorry for him. Then I had an idea. Maybe the super knew more about the dog, since he was the one who found him. I left Satan alone, and went to knock on the super's door. Knocked 3 times and nothing. Then I heard it. That same weird scream, low and constant. I'd heard at my neighbor's place, and again in that video. I grabbed the doorknob and opened it, surprised it wasn't locked. But the apartment was empty and the noise stopped. There wasn't even any furniture in the place. Just a desk by the window with a couple of pens, and this big old book open on it. Something about it pulled me in, and I walked over to look at the page. It was just names, one after another. The last 2 I recognized as the old woman and the accountant. I was about to flip the page when I heard a noise behind me and nearly jumped out of my skin. The super was standing at the door, staring me down. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked. I tried to explain, said I heard something and got worried. Said I came because of the dog. "As far as I know, he's your problem now," he said. And his tone made it clear the father called him in a not-so-nice way. "So get out of my apartment." I nodded and started walking out. But right as I got into the hallway, he called out again, laughing. "Everyone thinks it's the dog's name," he said between chuckles. "What?" I asked, confused. "The tag on the collar." "That's not the dog's name," he continued. "It's the owner's." Then he slammed the door in my face. That was yesterday, and I barely slept last night. I stayed up for hours digging through forums, random videos, anything I could find online that might explain what this dog is or what I'm supposed to do with him. But the thing that's really messing with my head is how he keeps staring at me all the time. And I'm starting to notice weird stuff now, like the way he limps just like the old lady did, or the way he sometimes wrinkles his nose like he's squinting, see better, just like the accountant. Maybe I'm losing it from the lack of sleep, but I swear to God, when I look into his eyes, I see someone begging for help. It's the same look I saw in the neighbor's burning eyes when I burst through her door. Story 7. Tapping on the outside of my windows. I'm not sure how to explain this, and to everyone I tell they brush me off for being paranoid, which understandable considering I am very anxious. But I know for a fact I am not making this up. It has happened to me various times and to many different degrees. So a couple months ago, when I was supposed to be packing to move away for college, I was laying on my bed and listening to music on my headphones while texting a friend. Something fell off, and I have no idea why, but I felt the need to pause my music and take off my headphones. At first, I assumed I'd heard my mom calling for me, but hadn't processed it. But with a few moments of silence, I could hear a light tapping right outside my window. My windows have blinds, and since my window faces the sun, I always kept them shut. My heart almost stopped, mainly because my room is on the 2nd floor, and there are no trees by the window that could be moved by the wind to cause a tapping noise. The tapping wasn't sporadic or continuous. Whatever was out there would tap on my window 2 or 3 times. What I assumed was listening for a reaction, then tapping again. I got unnerved but decided to ignore it, because I personally believe that if you pretend it doesn't affect you, it can't control you. After moving, I thought that would be it. I mean, I was moving countries, so whatever was would likely not follow me, right? The next time I heard it, I was in my dorm. I had finished unpacking the little things I had brought from home, and since I'd come early, my roommate hadn't arrived yet. It was peaceful having my own space, but I couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by everything. I brushed it off as nerves from being away from my parents and practically everything I knew. It was late at night, and I shamefully was scrolling through any app on my phone to distract myself from the fact that I actually need sleep. At some point I must have gotten bored because I put my phones down and closed my eyes to try to sleep. That's when I heard it again. There was a small window on the wall that my bed was against, and soft tapping insisted on making itself aware. I shut my eyes as naturally as I could, my attempt to fool the creature. The tapping continued. 1 to 3, pause, 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. It continued for what felt like hours. I got myself to calm down, breathing slowly. It shouldn't have, but it felt even more unnerving this time, because I was on the 1st floor of the dorm building. All I could think was, did I lock the window? Could the window even be locked? Did it want in? I let my thoughts wander for a moment, wishing it would end already. A part of me felt stupid for being so scared of tapping on a window That's when I heard a loud, singular bang against the window. I tensed before convincing myself it was just a dumb bird. I expected the tapping to continue, but it was done. No more tapping, no nothing. I didn't dare look at the window, just shutting my eyes and forcing myself to sleep. The next morning, I needed to assure myself that it was all a dream or some part of my imagination that led me into freaking out about it. I decided to peer out the window, look for whatever it could be that made all that noise. I expected trees, maybe a dead bird. What I saw didn't satisfy my brain. There was nothing. No trees surrounding the window. No bird that died from hitting my window. It would happen sporadically from then on, like it timed its appearances for when I forget, and it wanted to remind me. I'm sure it wasn't just some figment of my imagination. I tried to Google what it could be, but all I got was temperature changes from day to night to cause the window to expand or shrink, making soft popping noises, which was a decent explanation, but it just felt so oddly timed. As if whatever was planned its taps, planned what would happen, when it would scare me most. It's been around 2 months since I last heard it. I can't help but wonder what it could be. Was it real, or was I just paranoid and correlating these events together? It just all has so many coincidences and no explanation. I really hope that it got bored of my lack of reaction and is done tormenting me. Story 8. There have been a string of violent murders across my town. The main suspect isn't human. Out of all the cases that I've had as a criminal investigator, this one is probably the one I tell to only a few people, though I guess that wouldn't quite pan out. Since I'm typing this now, I've had my fair share of freaks and creeps in my day. Serial killers that collected pieces of their victims. Sick freaks, perverts, all of that. But this case is different. To save my own ass and not get in trouble, I'll be switching names and keeping the location vague. Though I doubt that will do me any favors due to how nutty and unique this case is. For reference, I work within a state that has lots of forests, mountains, and nature that creeps around into the cities and towns. The type to become one of those hallmark fall towns during the fall seasons, and winter wonderland covered in snow and ice during the cold months a vast majority it was, and to be truthful, still native land, and as such is kept in condition by the local tribes and conservationists. With this, of course, is a very easy way for people to get lost and potentially killed within these forests. So there have been plenty of meetings and such to prevent the amount of inevitable losses. Though recently, there have been a large string of murders happening in recent months. Young adults or hikers would go into the forest and not come back, only to resurface brutally killed. All of them have the same sort of markings / causes of death. Take, for example, the first victim, a 30-year-old man named Charles. He was found dead near a riverbed. His entire torso seemed to be ripped out, his organs that he left hung out from the hole that used to be his body, and his limbs covered in bruises and deep gashes that resembled claws. Everyone, including me, thought he was attacked by a bear or a large animal that had contracted rabies, since they're very common within those areas. But after closer inspection, me and the other investigator would come to find out that wasn't the case. More and more bodies would show up. Some would have entire limbs bitten off or half of their body just missing. It was some sickening shit. And the local department soon realized that they had a lot more than bears on their hands. That's when me and my partner, Miller, would be put onto the case. Miller was a younger man, about 25 years old, charming and handsome, as the elderly woman and some of the younger girls would point out. He was new to the town and had transferred to our neck of the woods when the opportunity came about. Nice kid, though the moment he came couldn't have been any worse. ______. Another body showed up, deep in the forest, dangling from a thick tree branch. The same as the rest, the torso almost devoured whole, and the right arm missing. Luckily for the crew involved, we didn't have to worry about the large crowds that would pile up whenever a new body was discovered closer to town. All the nearby residents would come and watch. Weirdly enough, curious tweens and teens would try and sneak a peek at the body and be sick right after seeing the disaster, and older folks would say a silent prayer, as if their words would help guide the lost soul to the pearly gates up above. Me and Miller stood at the edge of the police tape, Silence filled the air besides the shuddering of the camera for evidence and the crunch of fallen dead leaves. No one spoke. The same despondent look of, let's get this over with, was wrapped around their faces. It was just another day of cleaning up organs and looking at the mutilated faces of the dead. There's no way that another person could manually put the victim in the tree like that. Miller muttered breathlessly, and he was right. The branch that held the victim's body was at least a good couple feet off the ground. No person was able to hoist the body onto the branch like that unless they had gear. And even then, what was even the purpose of that? None of this was making any sense. But then again, this entire string of mishaps were just illogical. Come take a look at this. One of the forensics men called out to the two of us, his gloved hands waving us over as he kneeled on the ground over something. Upon closer inspection, it was a large book. It was worn with age, probably older than me and the vast majority of members in the department itself. A strange symbol was embedded into leather binding, colored in with a now faded shade of gold. Looks like something y'all would need. Smells like shit, but it seems important. The man shook his head. He wasn't wrong. The book smelled like something that had died long ago, rotting in the very back of a library, where no one touches the books, and they're left decaying the shelves for longer than needed. After the book was sealed into an evidence bag, Miller taking a closer look at it with gloved hands and a crossed expression. Haven't seen anything like this before. I thought it was some sort of Satanist symbol at first, but this looks a whole lot different. Are you saying you're an expert at some weird demonology stuff, Miller? Not at all. I think my hours of binge watching horror movies would have lent me a clue as to what it could have been. The look on my face seemed to be enough for him to chuckle and take back what he said. Anyway, we should probably get a look at this once we get back to the station. It seems important. Underscore. After the initial cleanup, me and Miller stood around the book in the evidence room. The book itself in the blinding fluorescent lights showed its age. The leather that bound the book together was basically decaying. Nothing like the fake stuff you find in some bookstore. The pages were a deep yellow and beige color, coated with mysterious stains. This thing was a lot older than I had thought. Probably from the 1800s, if I were to guess. Probably even further back. How the hell did the victim even get this sort of thing? No time to waste. Let's see if this thing could lend us a hand on this investigation. Miller carefully opened the book. It started off as most published books do, but when he focused on the words on the paper, he took pause. What the fuck does this say? Latin. All of it was in Latin. But from what we could see, it was some type of book containing things such as faces, anatomy, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you would typically see somewhere in a biology book or something related to evolution, but it was for something different. The people, or really things I should say, weren't human. They had digitigrade legs. The legs themselves morphed right where the knee would be for us, and became what I can only assume to be goat legs, or something the like. Their feet were hooved, hands ending in long nails or claws, and from the colored ink that was left, varying skin tones from pinks and reds to greens and blues. Hell, there were even sections that included different horn shapes and tail shapes and sizes, though that information was only for first 80 or so pages before being separated by a page and a small title within the center, a separate entry. There's no way that the victim could understand this. Even if they just looked at the pictures, they wouldn't grasp what the text was even saying. Miller shook his head and closed the book. He seemed disappointed, perhaps over the fact that we couldn't yet find a lead to all of these deaths. Calm down, Miller. I have a friend that can read Latin. I'll send it over to him and try to see what we can get out of it. You're not messing with me, right? Miller whipped his head to look at He with distrusting eyes. In what day and age can someone casually read Latin? A linguist, Miller. The shift in Miller's face was almost instant, turning from frustration to embarrassment and clarity all in one neat package. Right? We'll go ahead and contact him. If it's anything important, we'll bring it forward. Miller nodded, before leaving the room quietly. As he left, I stood there in that quiet room for what seemed like minutes, looking back down at that beat-up book. Something about it compelled me to keep looking, to keep discovering what I couldn't understand. And that was the point where I think I took a path that wouldn't lead back to the reality I knew. ______. The next section read like a journal entry. Pages upon pages of notes, short paragraphs, and so on sprawled over copious amount of pages until I uncovered more diagrams. These looked so much more different than the diagrams before. A lot more disturbing than I thought possible. It showed sickness, drawings of the same being spotted within the earlier pages contained in large rooms with small cots and loads of what I can only assume was Renaissance age or pre-modern medical tools and objects. There were barely any detailing within their faces, though some looked like they were in pain. Some doubled over and drawn vomiting something colored in red. The next page showed doctors working on a patient. The person, who is male due to his crotch being shown, was deathly skinny. His skeletal structure was practically visible with his skin, or the patches he had left acting like a thin blanket to keep everything together. One of his limbs was drastically longer than the other. It was like the bone itself snapped, separated under all of their muscle and skin, and connected back together to create a much longer version of itself. None of the words made sense. I couldn't understand a word of what was being written, but I could understand one thing. It spoke of a disease, the plague. The next few pages were almost the same thing. Doctors standing over different patients of different ages, all experiencing varying symptoms. Things such as vomiting, aggression, extreme fear and isolation, sensitivity to light, and a bunch of other stuff I couldn't understand. Whatever the hell was happening, it was bizarre. There wasn't a chance in hell that this stuff was even real, let alone plausible. In what world is there beings with horns and tails and digitigrade legs? It was a load of bullshit in my eyes, a fake journal to scare kids. But there was this itch at the very back of my head that told me that I still needed to send it over, to understand what it was saying. Even if it didn't benefit the case whatsoever, I needed to know. Underscore. Only a week had gone by after that. The contents of that book still itched at my head like a parasite, whispering the ideals and the sheer possibilities of what that journal could say. The town was starting to get even more antsy than ever before. The body count was now up to 12, and the department started to set up curfews and restriction zones in the forests. Many citizens were angry about some of their trails being closed down, or started to suspect the outcasts of being the forest cannibal, as they dubbed the killer. The sheriff decided to hold a town meeting in order to try and get everyone in line. After an incident involving a local man assaulting a homeless man because he looked suspicious. Right. As everyone knows, many have lost their lives within the boundaries of the forest to an unknown person. It's caused a lot of heartbreak and mistrust within this community. Sheriff Smith Marin started. But during these times, there have many of you that have acted completely out of line. He sounded like he was scolding children instead of a room of 4 dozen grown men and women, some older than him. Frankly, it was quite disappointing to see various grown men and women argue in a way of capturing the suspected killer and bringing him to justice by beating on a homeless man who frankly couldn't harm a soul. Paranoia and the climbing suspense of these killings had drawn the townspeople to try and enact some sort of revenge on those they deemed suspicious enough. As the sheriff kept talking, a woman burst into the hall, tears and sweat rolling down her face. "My babies! Please, you must find them." She shrieked frantically, causing everyone to turn and look at her with pity, fear, and confusion. "Mrs. Dimitri, what dash?" "My sons. They went into the restricted zone closest to the neighborhood with some of their friends. I have no idea where they could have went." Silence. The sheriff's face twisted into horror as some of the officers stood up. It was only a small bunch of us. A small group of deputies that I can't remember the names of, me and Miller, Captain Oventhal, Chief Deputy Franklin, and the sheriff himself. There were plenty of us to handle what we had assumed as a singular man. "Deputies, stay here and make sure no one leaves this building. Everyone else come with me." His voice was as steady as it could, a mix of panic rising within his voice as he grabbed his coat and ran out the doors. The shouts of the rest of the people within the hall died down as all of us ran outside and jumped into our cars. The sheriff was the fastest out of all of us, basically peeling out of the dingy parking lot before any of us stepped foot in our own vehicles. Underscore. Wind whistled past my ears as a group of officers surrounding me called out frantically. The flashlights we had on us were mediocre at best. But in the deep darkness that ate everything it touched, it was a sign. The sheriff's voice was the loudest out of all of us, his eyes wild and panicked as he tried to make as much noise as possible to see if any of the kids would be able to hear us. I was confused as to why he was like this. As much as we did stuff like finding children, he never seemed to be this messed up about it. But looking now, I realized that his own son was with that group on that night as well. A sudden scream west of us caught our attention, leading us to a smaller clearing within the forest itself. The scream came from one of the boys, no older than 11 years old. His arm was broken as he laid in the grass, rolling in pain and holding his arm as the blood soaked through his small blue jacket. He wailed that there was something huge that chased after the group, and he was the only one that got separated after he fell. Poor kid was a sobbing mess, but he seemed to be lucky considering what would happen to some of his friends. Miller stayed back with him as we continued forward. The sounds of shouting and what I thought were tree branches snapping became clearer as we approached that thing. I must mention this before I continue, but I'm really unsure how I did it. At one point, I turned on my body camera that I had just put on and set up properly before the meeting. It must have been during the struggle of getting out of the car and into the forest itself. If it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have even been able to piece together what I know now. What greeted us when we reached that group was nothing that can compare to any horrifying experience I've ever had in my life. Nothing can and will be able to change that. The boys were all scattered around the forest floor, some injured with broken limbs, and others bleeding from their heads. All of them were fully alert and looking at the creature in abject horror. One stood as tall as he could, waving a stick at the being, while the other dangled loosely from its grip. And that thing, Jesus, it was tall, almost 9 feet if I were to guess. Digitigrade legs that barely held itself up stood tall, patches of what I assumed was for clung onto the last bits of skin around its legs. Its skin was a deep red, with flecks of flesh and muscle sinew jutting out from the various open wounds on its body. And it wasn't like it was a lot of muscle either. That beast was almost skin and bone. Its chest didn't even have skin on it, showing an odd-looking rib cage with a still beating heart, lungs that slowly pulsed, and the remaining of what I can only assume were its organs. All of it seemed like it was rotting away, and it smelled like it too. The putrid stench of a body that was floating in water for days on end penetrated the noses of everyone that came close enough. I could hear officers gagging as they covered their noses the best they could while hoisting their guns. I didn't get to see its face until it looked down at us. It looked terrified. Terrified as if it wasn't holding the unconscious body of a middle schooler, and terrified as if it didn't know what it was doing. Its features were confusing. I can't tell if it's from my memory actively blocking out the moment, or if it was simply like that in the first place. But its face was sunken in. Its teeth were sharp and stained red and yellow from blood and simply rot. And its eyes, they were a dull purple, the misery and pain etched into each and every inch of its eyes as it looked at us, slowly moving a long, clawed hand over its eyes. Then it spoke. Quiso miserere. A rough, raspy voice spoke. It sort of sounded like a kid speaking when it was in trouble, its head low and body cowering. Drop the body. Now! The sheriff shouted as he pointed his gun at the creature. Step away from the children. Tam Serio. The creature looked at the child in its hands. The kid's right forearm was missing. A chunk of the body was missing. It dropped the boy, backing away from us. The other boy ran to his friend, frantically wrapping his arm with a sweater. Neminem alium later volo. Vener meus putrescit, said Fame for Severat. It continued to speak, backing away from the lights that shined on its face. It cowered in fear. Its wide eyes flickered between all of us. Don't move. Stay down. Keep your hands where they are. The sheriff and officers kept shouting. All of their voices turned into a sea of words as the creature slowly stepped further and further away from a group. Quiso, nalimi latera. Snap. A branch underneath the creature's foot broke, causing one of the officers close to me to fire a shot into the creature's shoulder. The wail of pain that it let out was something beyond loud. It was like a cross from a human scream and an inhuman bellow. The creature soon ran off. The thumping of its feet echoed throughout the forest as it fled. The stench of rot followed it as it vanished into the night. Silence followed, The small wheeze of one of the children snapped the rest of us back into reality. Underscore, 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 underscore. It was only the day after that I realized that I had the footage. I sent off a copy to the same linguist in order to translate it. And during that time I realized something. That creature had the same exact features I saw in the book. I couldn't just go into the station then and look at it again, but from everything that I remember, it was almost exactly like a reference image given in one of the starting chapters of the book. And that same wave, it looked so sickly. It was just like the images shown in the second chapter. I couldn't stop thinking about that imagery. So in a moment of weakness and curiosity, I took the book back with me. It's not like they're going to need it anyway. I was looking more into the pictures when I finally got the translations back along with the video. And I'm really not sure if I should share this with the rest of the station, let alone anyone else in the town. We told the public that it was a mutated animal that fled, and we are actively looking for it to put it down for good. The boys themselves haven't said anything, since they've still been in the hospital being treated for their wounds. I doubt that they'll even speak about this beyond anyone else. And if they did, I doubt they'll be believed. But for what I found in the books, I don't think I believe it myself. It speaks about the bone structure of what they call the Demonleo species. The first part of the book goes into detail about the body structure, the way different sins have differing body types, horn types, and tail types. I still thought it was a giant crock of shit, to be honest. There wasn't a single change in hell that it was real. But I then got to the section about the disease. It spoke about a plague that swept through the lands. Each subgroup experienced different symptoms and varying ways of how the infection took hold based on what they guessed were genetic differences. The first sign of infection all around was severe vomiting and nausea, tremors, fear or aggression, and sensitivity to many lights and sounds. Very rarely did the infection reach the bloodstream, causing what I can only assume is sepsis and take hold of the body. A vast majority of the time, it attacked what I'm still assuming is the endocrine system. After a significant amount of time, the body will grow and distort before basically dying with the brain and heart still functioning, causing the afflicted to either mutate or die. If I were to even believe this, this means that whatever or whoever is out there in the forest is one of those beings. God, I can't even imagine how it's feeling. Imagine your entire body rotting around you. You can't do a thing to stop it unless you either die or just mutate further enough to the point you don't even know what you're doing. And not to mention that it knew that something had happened to it. It begged for us to stop. Dear God, I remember watching the video translated and feeling the sensation of bile reach my throat. Please have mercy. I'm so hungry. I don't want to hurt anyone else. My stomach is rotting, but the hunger persists. Please don't hurt me. Those words make me feel ill. Like I aimed a gun at some poor, helpless soul that couldn't help being what it was. But the main thing that concerns me is if that thing was real. Where did it come from? How the fuck did it even get here? Is that a demon? Is hell real? I don't know. I have a migraine from all of this hitting me at once. If there's anyone that might be able to help me, please say something. I can't bear to be the only one to know this in this town. Everyone is acting like it's completely fine, and I know it won't be when the next incident happens. I just need someone to talk to about this. Story 9. The people shall be troubled. My eyes fluttered open from a dreamless sleep, and I stared up into a blackness that was as empty as a starless sky. My breath stung my lungs and felt heavy as I drew it in, as though I were trying to suck the air from a wine bottle. A sheen of sweat slicked across my skin. Blinking into the blackness, I tried to remember where I was and when I had gone to sleep. My throat still ached, and the crackle in my cough reminded me that I had been ill. It had started as a tickle in my throat and spread into a dry cough. My skin had gone clammy, and a nagging ache in my bones fought against every movement. But I had refused to stop working, despite feeling under the weather that morning. The fever had crept in throughout the day, slow and merciless. And then I remembered the sudden faintness that had washed over me. The room had begun to spin, and I had toppled over, with no one else in the building. There had been no sense in crying for help. I blinked again into the utter blackness. Was this my sewing room? No, the sewing room had windows that overlooked the streets. I should have been able to see the glow from the lamps outside. This darkness was like nothing I had ever known. Every bone in my body ached, defying movement, screaming for a breath of cool, fresh air. I lifted my hand a few inches and jumped at the soft thunk of my knuckles striking something hard. My other hand met the same resistance. I kicked out my feet. Thud, thud, more unyielding surface. Something was across the top of me. Was I under a table? I turned my head left, then right, blinking blindly against a nothingness. To my sides, I heard the echo of my own labored breathing bounce back at me. The air was damp, clinging to my lungs, feeding my cough. My ears rang from the silence, and the faint pounding of my heart filled the cramped space. Walls pressed against my sides. A solid surface pinned me from above. A sick realization crept through me as I accepted the horrifying truth. I was in a coffin. I tried to raise my fist to pound against the lid, but my arms couldn't fit between my chest and the wood. They stayed locked at my sides, adding to the unbearable claustrophobia. Panic flared in my chest. My boots lashed out wildly. A whimper slipped from my lips, rising into a shriek of terror and rage. My nails dug into the wood above me, clawing frantically. I felt them peel back, hot pain tearing through my fingertips. Blood trickled down my wrists, soaking my sleeves, making the coffin's lid slick. I thrashed, slamming my head against the top as I twisted, desperate to free at least one hand. The slickness of my own blood gave way, and I managed to slide my right hand upward along my chest until it pressed above my head. Now one hand lay pinned above me, the other trapped at my side. My lungs ached, each cough a violent spasm that heaved my chest upward. The force thrust my arm farther back until my shoulder snapped out of its socket. I screamed, the rawness of my throat tearing open with agony. Fire consumed my shoulder, my fingertips buzzing as if electricity raced through them. I tried to yank my arm back down, but it dangled uselessly above me in a grotesque mock salute. My free arm spasmed helplessly at my side, desperate to help. I gasped shallowly, choking on the dense air. It felt less like suffocating and more like drowning. Sweat soaked through my clothes and plastered my skin. I made one last, pitiful attempt to force the shoulder back into place, twisting against the coffin's side. My teeth clamped into my lip as pain ripped through me, but the joint refused to snap back. I screamed again. Blood welled in my mouth, metallic and bitter, puddling on my tongue. Tears streamed down my face and mingled with blood in the darkness. Help me. I croaked, my voice weak, my strength unraveling. The darkness shifted before my eyes, like the mouth of a deep well yawning open beneath me. I felt myself leaning into it, tipping forward as though my body were weightless. My stomach lurched, my feet seemed to rise, and I plunged. I fell endlessly, hair twisting like snakes against my face. The abyss pulled me deeper, directionless, merciless. I opened my mouth to scream again, but instead it filled with a stale, suffocating air, thick as fog, choking me. My body convulsed, froth bubbling at my lips. My eyes stared unblinking into the void, desperate for a glimpse of light at the bottom of this endless well. Somewhere in my mind, I imagined the splash when I struck the water waiting below. I told myself it would be cool, soothing against my fevered flesh. It would wake me. It would save me. I thrashed harder, my forehead banging the coffin lid above. And then I smiled. I felt it. A cool drop slid down my face. Relief surged through me as I waited for the flood of well water to wash over me. But it never came. Instead, the bead of hot blood began running down into my eye, pooling until it spilled over my cheek and clogged my ear. But by then, I barely felt it. My shallow breath stilled. My bleeding fingers fell open limply. My boots splayed outward, tapping softly against the coffin walls. My eyes, sticky with blood, remained open. They would stay open, expectant, until the coffin was open again the next day. And though I would never taste the cool air again, my tombstone would be engraved with a warning. Or, some whispered, a curse. The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away. They said it was safe. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Greg died yesterday. Sarah panicked and was eaten this morning. And Joe, oh God, Joe couldn't take it anymore. He walked right out into the open, staring the beast in the eye as if daring to end him. I wanted to stop him. I really did. But there was nothing I could do. 1 second he was there, shaking, screaming, and the next, nothing. Just silence. The hall smells like rust and meat. My boots crunch over shattered glass and feathers torn from who knows what. My hands won't stop shaking long enough to reload. The radio on my vest crackles every few minutes with static, like someone trying to talk, but keeps cutting out. Every time I reach for it, the noise dies. They told us everything was secure. Fences, alarms, containment systems. They said it was impossible for anything to escape. But they lied. Something went wrong overnight. I don't know exactly what, and I don't know if anyone will ever admit it, but the beast got out. The smaller predators followed, tearing through the staff who weren't fast enough. And then the pteranodons. I don't even know how they got out. One moment they were in their aviary. The next, they were flying over the park, wings beating the air like storm clouds. Shadows swept over buildings. Their screeches cut through the dark like jagged knives. They swooped down, snatching people from the grounds. Workers, maintenance crews, anyone outside, they didn't stand a chance. I saw one grab a man as he tried to crawl into a supply shed. The man screamed, then vanished into the sky. I couldn't stop looking. I didn't want to, but I couldn't look away. Power failed. Fences collapsed. Alarms kept screaming. Everything that was supposed to keep us safe became useless overnight. The whole park went dark, and chaos spread faster than anyone could react. I keep my head low. The predators have been gone from this section for a while, or maybe they're just hiding, waiting. I can hear claws scraping metal somewhere in the vents, or maybe that's just the pipes. I don't know anymore. My eyes are burning from lack of sleep. There's blood on the walls. Some of it's human, some of it's not. A kid's stuffed animal lies in the corner, soaked and half-shredded. I don't stop to look at it. I can't. They said a helicopter was coming to rescue survivors. Any survivors head to the helipad. That's what the radio said. But I don't believe it. They don't care about us. We're disposable. We've been disposable from day one. The entire facility is disposable. I'm writing this as I walk, my rifle slung uselessly over my shoulder. The door ahead is jammed, and I'm too tired to panic about the noise I'm making as I force it open. Something growls in the dark behind me. I push harder. The door gives way. I can hear a boat horn far off. Maybe there really is a way out. Maybe there isn't. My compass says I'm heading north, but the helipad's supposed to be south. I'll have to turn around. If I turn around, the beast will see me. The dinosaurs have taken over the island. Every fence, every gate, everything, gone. Shadows of wings still pass overhead. The island belongs to them now. I'm heading toward the helipad. If you find this notebook and not me, there are weapons in the basement. I'm probably dead. If you do make it off the island, give my family my dog tags.